You're listening to the Synergy Leadership Podcast, a discussion with engaging, empowering, and enlightening leaders about the greatest competitive advantage in business and entrepreneurship that often goes unrecognized: a team's energy. Here's your host, the woman who puts the energy in synergy, Karen R. Jenkins.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Synergy Leadership Podcast. I am thrilled and honored to have a very important and influential member of our Columbia community, and the impact that he and his organization makes on our ecosystem in Columbia is phenomenal. I've had the opportunity to meet Tommy for the first time several months ago, and we just connected. And as I shared with him, Tommy, you're stuck with me for the rest of your life. So Tommy, I want to welcome you to our podcast. As president and CEO of our great Riverbanks Zoo, can you just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your background and how you got here?
Sure. Well, good morning, and really appreciate you having me as a guest. Yes, so Tommy Stringfellow, the president and CEO, Riverbanks Zoo and Garden. My background, as most people are amazed to find out, is not in animal or animal science or zoology. I actually came through the theme park route, and I won't go back as far as will show my age, but growing up in Rock Hill, right near Charlotte, was a theme park called Carowinds, which probably anybody that lives around here knows and has been. And this is like a prerequisite if you grew up in the Rock Hill, Charlotte area. You had to get a job there during the summertime, during high school or college. And that's what I did. And my first job was parking cars. I thought I was going to be running the cool rides where, all the cool people hang out, but somehow I stuck out in the parking lot directing traffic. But over the years, as I was working my way through school, I learned that a parking lot attendant was very critical to a guest visit. It's the first thing they see when they get here, and usually the last thing they see on the way out. That first impression of whether I'm leaning on a trash can and I don't care which way the cars go, versus maybe I'm really attentive and I'm giving great directions and I have a smile on my face, is a huge difference to how, in any business, that the face of the employee that greets you can matter tremendously through the day. Even if they are having a bad day, getting them off on the right foot is really cool. So that inspired me to kind of go through the theme park field, because not only was I seeing kids that were excited and parents that were excited, we were kind of giving them escape from the day-to-day reality by coming to a theme park and riding rides and eating all the cool food and all. And so it kind of got in my blood, where I really enjoyed the entertainment side, the hospitality side of being able to take guests who maybe have been saving up a lot to go spend their money and have a great day, to maybe just, let's get out of this rat race and go have fun with the kids, be together with the family. And that passion grew, and I started full-time right out of college in marketing. I didn't realize that theme parks needed to market. I just thought they opened the doors and people came to ride these really cool rides. And then realized, oh no, there's so many things that need to be marketed to different graphics. And so I was fortunate to land a role at Carowinds in the marketing department, and that's where my career took off. Over the next 20 years, I worked for 3 different theme park companies. I worked for Six Flags, I worked for Paramount Parks, and I worked for a smaller group called King's Entertainment, who owned a lot of mom and pop parks. But with Six Flags, which was the most recent employer before I came to Riverbanks, I was in charge of branding the theme parks, and they were buying a lot of small parks all over the country. The most recent, they sent me to live in New York, upstate New York, to brand 3 parks up there. So I got to travel and live in the New York area for a long time and traveled to upstate. And then final move was to Six Flags over Atlanta, where they moved me into several positions more operationally minded. And we were having kids at the time, and our families were, my wife was here in Columbia and mine were up in Rock Hill, and we wanted them to see the grandkids. So we kind of made a lifestyle move to say, I love the corporate side of this, but I would have ended up in Oklahoma City, where the office for Six Flags was at the time. And that was a little too far from home. And so we looked around. I wasn't sure I wanted to go back to Carowinds, but we had a call from South Carolina PRT, who was helping to find somebody that knew how to market attractions, specifically zoos and aquariums, and got a call and said, you're from this area, would you like to come back? And we have an opening at Riverbanks Zoo and Garden in the marketing department as the director of marketing communications. And my first thought was, I don't know a lot about animals, but I remember growing up and I remember the zoo was a cool zoo. It was one we went to field trips on and we always loved going. So I told my wife, I said, here's an opportunity to get back home, but it's not theme parks. Instead of marketing rides and marketing animals and education and conservation. What I really liked about it was the fact that we weren't lining corporate stockholders with bonuses. We were going to the nonprofit side of the world that could do a lot of good for saving endangered species, for educating kids on the environment. And I tell you, trading a beautiful tiger, endangered tiger, for a major roller coaster is more than a fair trade. So I took a chance and I have been here since to work my way up from the marketing director to the COO, and most recently in the last 6 years as the CEO and president of Riverbanks Zoo.
Wow, that is a awesome career. And I love, for me, in the jobs that I've had in the past, I've started, at the entry level and then worked my way up like you did. And it makes a difference because you have a purview of every single aspect of the organization. And it makes a difference when you lead that organization, when you can add the value of having seen the different levels. So, Tommy, you're only the third executive to oversee the zoo and its 43-year history. This is pretty impressive. When you look at, you've been with the zoo for nearly 2 decades. Tell us what you think is the most meaningful and impactful experience that you've had with the zoo.
First of all, I was blessed. I like to say, even though I'm the third president CEO, I'm the second longest serving, which says the first one didn't last much more than a couple of years. And then my predecessor was here for 43 years, pretty much from the time the park opened. And I've been the last 7 years heading to our 50th anniversary. Being able to have a mentor of somebody that has been in that role was inspiring, just to say the least, in learning a lot about the business. But gosh, I'm not sure when I thought through this question, it seems like every day there's an encounter or something that is so impactful that I say, this was my favorite and most meaningful experience today. And it keeps getting topped with others. And a couple of good examples are the ability to see a child come face to face with a gorilla and the amazement on their face just makes you warm and fuzzy that you were able to bring those connections together in something that that child or that adult that will impact them for the rest of their life. And maybe make them want to do something more than just admire the beauty of these animals and maybe contribute, maybe do some volunteer work that could have an impact on the future of those animals. And so I would say that is one of my favorite, is just seeing those connections made. But then it gets topped with the fact that I'm fortunate as the executive director that I get to take a group to Africa every year. Now, COVID put the pause button on that for 3 years. I remember the last trip I took a group of 12 to, let's see, we were in Kenya for a while and then Tanzania. But in Kenya, there are the last two surviving southern white rhinos in the world. There are only two left. And it's a mother-daughter. And that gives you kind of a chill to think that once those two are gone, there'll be no more like it, which gives zoos and aquariums and conservationists the passion to do what we can to save other species so that doesn't happen. We're still hanging on to the fact that there may be a way that we can learn from this or maybe save them somehow. But on that trip, I was able to take this group to actually go to the conservation area and actually touch and see and get our photographs with these last two in the world. That impacts me. That probably would never happen had I not been in this industry to be able to go do that. That one probably is at all times the peak of what we try to do here, and to be able to see, sadly, what was happening, but excitingly, because I got to be a part of that experience.
That's phenomenal. I can't imagine it. I guess that's on my bucket list, to travel to Africa or to some other countries to have that experience. But again, you're stacking your childhood and youth experiences with, travel experiences, which to me just makes you a better, not just person, but a better leader. So when you look at the fact that you're leading this organization and the impact that it has on the individuals that come there to our community, can you describe your leadership style and how it's been a driving force in your success?
Well, you kind of mentioned it that, if you've been at the line level of any job and worked your way up, I think you find real quick as a leader that a lot of decisions could be made by those that deal with the public or deal with whatever product you're at because they're in it day to day. And as a leader, as you move up the ladder, it seems like you're now in a building with a computer in front of you. You're in meetings all the time, and it's so easy to lose focus on what's happening inside the facility. I think you'll find, if you ask my employees, that they really enjoy the fact that I do get out to talk to them a lot. But I like them making the decisions or trying to do the best to push all those that are asking me for things to push it to the line level and let them make the decisions from the bottom up.
Hmm.
By the time it gets to me, it's a no brainer. If there's a tie to something, then I get to choose. But most of the time, the team has figured it out long before I have because they're in it day to day. So my preference isn't, hey, I can make a decision if you want me to, but I really want to hear what our staff's saying. So my leadership style is more to ask a lot of questions and listen, not make knee jerk reactions, not make decisions because it's an emotional thing or because it's just what I want. It is more about what does the team feel the direction should be and guide them along the way to achieve it. So I'm more of making sure that the team is involved in every decision that we make. And then once again, if it needs to be a tiebreaker, then I get to choose that. But to that point, most of the time, the team can make that happen.
So Tommy, I'm going to almost expand this outside of the walls of the land of the zoo itself. So beautiful picture, aerial picture behind you. And if I could get you to share with our audience what that is. But after you do that, talk to us about how you as a leader has integrated the zoo into our ecosystem as a community, not just Columbia and the Midlands, but the state in general.
Absolutely. So not many people know, how we're governed. We are a form of government, quasi government called a special purpose district. And those that dreamed of having a zoo in Columbia really started off with more of a let's do a little children's petting zoo or maybe a park. But what they had the vision was back then is, let's make this happen on the Saluda River, which we know now is a hotbed for what we can in the future grow, but also in both counties, which make up Columbia. And putting a entity like us in two counties means you've got to have decision makers from both counties to help drive or run or fund or make this happen collaboratively with a river between the two. And so I quickly learned when I got here, when I was on the private side of business, you had your board of directors, and then on the nonprofit side of business and slash governmental, that there are a lot of stakeholders that had stock in this zoo and had input and needed input and wanted what's best for their county. So I learned real quickly that having our success continue as it had the last 43 years, it was getting our stakeholders involved even more. County councils were changing seats quicker than ever, and building relationships with them were critical. Most of them that stepped into a city seat or a county seat didn't realize or that the zoo was governmental and that both counties and the city have representation on our board. And they were excited to hear that because they all have opinions and it's trying to mold both the counties and the city that, once again, who helped make the zoo great over those years, making sure that they were part of our decisions as well. What's going on around us matters. The river divides us, but yet it unites us. And the focus with our future just happened to be us trying to figure out how we can put the river in Riverbanks. You could come to the zoo and never know you're on the river. We have a bridge that crosses it, but unless you're going to the garden, you may not see it. And it just so happened it aligned about the time when the rest of the community realized that that river could be a valuable resource for growth and tourism and the quality of living here in Columbia. There are a lot of cities I lived in that would have loved to have one river, much less three, run through it. So it worked well that in our future expansion that we wanted to bring the zoo and the garden closer to the river at the same time that the River Alliance and the councils and the city and county councils wanted to look at how can we get more people on it with a river walk, with more education, with more amenities on the river. And I was fortunate that the timing was good with making those decisions and involving both councils, all three councils, in our growth for the future. And they liked that as well, since the river was such a big focus of it. Did that answer your question? Did I?
It does answer. And for my audience who isn't familiar with the zoo, tell us a little bit about the zoo. What's the size of the zoo? What's the economic impact to our economy? And then if you would recommend them going to see maybe two things at the zoo, what would those two things be?
Absolutely. Well, we try to brag about it. Hopefully the community's heard, but I will brag about it again. We are the most visited zoo in the Southeast. Now that is from New York down to Miami, and there's some massive cities. Zoo Atlanta, 4 million people in the community, and Riverbanks Zoo and Garden does more in attendance than they do. So that ought to be a point of pride for our community that we attract people from all over the Southeast to come to Riverbanks Zoo and Garden. We do 1.2 million people on the average. With expansion, we see the attendance going up to 1.5 million. And 40% of that comes outside of the state of South Carolina. So, 600,000 plus visitors that come don't even live in the state or live outside of an area that come spend their money when they're here in town. A lot of them come, whether it's for visiting Fort Jackson for graduation and then stay and go to Riverbanks, maybe come for a football game, basketball game for the USC, come for the State House for governmental side. But we are considered one of those that not only drive attendance, but also is a reason to stay in town or stay for an extra day, which drives rooms, hotel rooms, and restaurant sales, not just in Riverbanks, but outside of. Our economic impact, we measure every year, is at $149 million a year in economic impact. We support over 1,100 jobs in the two counties. We have actually just recently were announced by the chamber to be we had received the largest employer of the year award. And not many people know that when our peak season is over 700 employees working here. In slow times and full time, we have about 180. The rest are seasonal or part-time that help make the zoo what it is. So when taxpayers and those that help fund the zoo look at it, we hope, as an investment, that the return on their investment with that 140 million a year more than offsets the amount of dollars that's needed to fund the zoo or run the zoo. So it has a big impact for the community, for tourists. And we're excited about the next few years as we expand to the river, showing these 1.2 million visitors that there is a river, a beautiful river, that they can come back and visit or soon walk down from the dam all the way to downtown.
That is awesome. So if I'm coming in to visit the zoo, and you can do three if you want, but what would be the top 2 or 3 things that I would need to see?
This is where I get in trouble with the keepers. It's kind of like trying to answer, who's your favorite child?
Okay, well, then you can say 5.
That's right.
I'll give you some leverage.
I'll say it depends on the day. I think they'll know what my answer is. I always say it's, always the one I'm standing in front of, which frustrates them. But, to me, our sea lion exhibit is phenomenal. They're always moving around, and it's right inside the gate. And we do several presentations a day, which give you a lot of information on how they're kept, how they're fed, how they're, threatened with the things that threaten. And, and it's right in the middle of the zoo. So to me, that would be one of my first stops, is make sure you don't miss one of the presentations. Usually it's around 10:30 in the morning and 2:30 in the afternoon. It'll vary a little bit depending on the time of year, but you can't go wrong there even without a presentation. You can go down below and see them swimming, as well as on top and looking down on the pier. And then obviously gorillas, one of the few exhibits that you can come face to face through a pretty thick glass, but you feel like you are right there in it with them. And they love interacting with guests. That's some of their enrichment, is to see the facial expressions on guests. And so they're very not only entertaining, but we also feel education wise, we do a good job with explaining a little bit about their habitat and their environment and what you could do to ensure that we will have gorillas in this world forever. Then I'm a cat lover too. I love the big cats, lions, tigers being side by side. Those are three that are on opposite sides of the zoo, but give you the opportunity to see all the other cool ones along the way. Those would be three I would pick.
Awesome. Awesome. I remember when my kids were younger, we had the membership that allowed us to kind of go out when we wanted to. And I would say from my memory back then, and of course, my daughter's 28, my son's 25, I would say the sea lions was probably one of my favorites to go and see as well.
And Karen, not to be remiss, but you have to go to the garden. We are one of the most inspiring gardens in the country, been named by HGTV and won several awards. But we do have beautiful formal botanical gardens, do tons of weddings there. But that's a must see outside of the animals.
I will fix that because I probably have seen everything else that you have seen, but I have not seen the botanical gardens. Again, as I shared with you earlier, Colombia has so many hidden jewels for the people that live here, right? One of them, I think, is reminding us what's right in our backyard, which is the zoo, the botanical gardens, the river walk that they're building out. And as you said, there's ability right now to walk on the river walk right now. And then you can know that when they finish with Malfunction Junction, the construction there, as you stated, they're going to run the river walk from the zoo all the way up to the Lake Murray Dam. I mean, how phenomenal is that going to be? It's phenomenal now. I mean, I was out on the river with the River Alliance, and I was just in awe of what I was looking at. So I'm planning to make time to go and spend more time out there. I'm definitely coming back to visit you. We've already talked about it. I'm gonna have a day at the zoo and his team. But I love what's happening in our community. I love what you and all of the wonderful team members that you have are doing to support the animals, to support our community, and to give not only the people that live here, but the people that visit just a great experience. And I think it's through your leadership, and I'll go back through that again, of understanding the value of letting it be led from the bottom up and not necessarily the top down. We don't have all the answers, and who has better answers or have better access to what the true issues are and what the solution should be than our teams. I'm just in my happy place right now, just knowing everything that's going on at the zoo. So, we talk about it, and I share this all the time, that synergy leadership is the ability to leverage a team's energy and to create results, adapt to change, and make a difference. So when you look at it from your perspective on this, how have you seen it work within your organization as far as creating that synergy or having that synergy leadership?
Absolutely. I think we learned just how nimble we were during COVID. Obviously presented us with a lot of challenges, and we knew at that point in time we really had to find whatever synergies we could to keep us going until we could figure it out. And what I mean by that is, at that time the zoo was closed, weren't getting any admissions revenue, people buying tickets or buying food since we're closed. Like a lot of places that closed down, didn't have any expenses, maybe an empty building or some heat and air, but we had still the majority of our expenses go to feeding animals. So we learned real quick, all right, what do we have to do to tap into whatever resources we could get, whether it was what through federal funding, which at that time we weren't available, found out we weren't eligible for because of the type of government we were, which really challenged us to lean on the public for private donations, the reserves that we had. And going through that, I think we really understood that having a public-private partnership was key, that we needed to, in the future, continue building the synergies between the counties who were helping with some of the funding, the private entity we call the Riverbanks Society, which is your membership, goes to a private nonprofit side of it. And we realized that as long as we could continue using the ability to tell the counties, look, we will do our best to match whatever government dollars come in with private dollars, so it makes it a good public-private partnership. and having two counties and two different city municipalities along with our private partnership, it was real critical that we figured out how the synergies of those working together could make it successful. And that was challenging at times because we are all pulling sometimes against each other because we want what's best for our county or city or Riverbanks and what the private sector wants. So, yeah, being able to balance that was critical for us, and we know it will be in the future. So we will do our best to make sure that the revenues we're generating will be part of that investment, just like the governmental side of it.
Excellent. So, as we begin to wrap up, I want you to share of everything that you've experienced on your leadership journey. What are you most proud of?
I'm most proud of the fact that I was able to keep a work-life balance. That if you ask my family through all this, even in times that it got hard, that I didn't miss out on any of the kids' ball games or dance lessons or so that was critical for me. I unfortunately in my career lost one of my children along the way, and
I'm sorry to hear that.
um, yeah, and knowing that you don't think that could happen, but there's no regrets that I had because I could have had a lot with all the focus I had on working my way up the ladder. But I would say to me that I was there and still am, and the zoo and my career means a lot to me, but family does too. And as you know, that's so hard to do. And and then probably the most challenging, which I know everybody struggles with when you get to the level of a senior executive, is letting go of the things that got you there. Still
Right.
struggle with that. That is my biggest challenge.
Yes.
Is thank goodness somebody gave me the ability to do my thing and let go of what they did. But I challenge our senior staff. We feel like we know better what got us here, can make us successful, but we know there's a generation and a bench behind us that we've got to make sure are ready. And that letting go of a lot of things would probably be the second most thing I've been proud of because that's hard to do.
Tommy, I have to say that's the first time I've gotten that answer, but it's so impactful and it's so true. And I will say this, that makes you even a better leader, right? Because when you are able to not sacrifice something like your family, which, as leaders, we typically do, you are taking care of your family, but then you begin to be more whole than if you were trying to do all of this on the corporate side or the business side, sacrifice your family, then all of that starts unraveling, right? And it is a juggling act. There's no balance. I call it equilibrium. You remember the day when we had the equalizers for your stereo, where you had the balance of this, and this, and at any get point in time, one was down a little bit, that kind of thing. But I commend you on ensuring that you protected that part of your life that shows you that you're a leader of your family as well as a leader of your organization, but even more so a leader of your life. So I thank you for doing that. I am the same way that when it came to my jobs that I've had in the past or my business, that I made sure that I did not sacrifice my family. My daughter touts that I've only missed one of her games out of her entire career,
Right.
starting at the fifth grade, right?
That's
And
great.
that was because I was out of town and came in immediately and just missed one night of a tournament. So that makes me proud. And I know it makes you proud to be able to say that. And I welcome all of our other leaders to figure it out, right? How do you make that balance? And I think you gave them the recipe that we don't have to be it all and do it all, that leveraging the talent that we have and letting them carry the water instead of us trying to carry it all ourselves is going to be the game changer. So thank you for sharing that with us. So as we close, my last question is if you could give one piece of advice on leadership to our listeners, what would it be?
Wow, that's another good. Listen instead of talk, listening to your staff or listening to your family or listening to other leaders and not trying to respond, just listening to me is still so key because you learn a lot more. And I think people also find that you're invested in them, that he was anxious to hear what I had to say about it. And that's hard, once again, to do. But I found that, and that's one of those things you have to learn to do. It seems easy, you just got to listen, but in your mind, you're already trying to solve problems and fix things. If you listen and understand, then I think you're in a lot better position to lead in the future.
That is so true. And you're so right that listening is not something that, we hear people,
Yep.
but the question is, are you listening? And the listening part is a skill that you have to exercise that muscle. It is not easy to do. So you hit the nail on the head with that one. So Tommy, thank you so much. I have thoroughly enjoyed our time together. I hope I can reserve the right to invite you back because there's a lot more that I think we can unravel. If somebody needed more information on the zoo, or if they wanted to reach out to you, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. I still love people to go see our website because we have so much great information. My contact information, as well as our board leaders are on our website. Lots of great information out, when we're open and a lot of the economic impact. Mainly, I love the fact that we show what we're doing for the community, not just here outside of our fence for conservation reasons, but across the world. We have some really great stories to tell. That would be my first suggestion. Check that out. And hopefully we have a little chat bot that, you can ask questions and smart enough to answer all. But that's another good option to learn a little bit about us. Socially, we're on Facebook and Instagram and all the others at Riverbanks Zoo.
So what is the URL? Riverbankzoo.
It's riverbanks.org.
Riverbanks.org. Tell you there is a lot of information there. So go out to riverbanks.org, tell your friends, tell your family, go and visit, even if you're out of state. Make a point that when you come visit Columbia to please come and visit our awesome zoo that's led by our awesome leader, Tommy Stringfellow. So again, Tommy, thank you for joining us. And we'll see you guys on our next episode of Synergy Leadership Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Synergy Leadership Podcast with Karen R. Jenkins. If you like what you heard today, please subscribe, rate, review, and share our show. See you next time.